Everyone, it's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and now we are on for real with tonight's guest, Ruth Chung. She's a family and matrimonial attorney in New York City, right in our neck of the woods. And I'm so glad that she's coming to join us. I just found out a few minutes ago that one of our clients is the same as her, shares her as a client. So that was kind of cool because it's like 6 degrees of separation. You never know who you're going to meet, and we didn't meet that way, but just invited you to join. Hopefully it'll work. And we have a whole bunch of questions. There you go. So hi again.
Hi again.
Okay, so now introduce yourself for real. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, because you are one of what I call the unicorn attorneys about your background.
Thank you. Well, so my name is Ruth Chung. I'm a matrimonial and family law attorney in New York City, and before I went to law school, I got a bachelor's and master's in forensic psychology. I bartended for a few years, some years in Manhattan, and after law school, I worked for a nonprofit for a couple of years before starting my own practice.
So you have a lot of interesting social emotional skills that many attorneys don't have, especially working as a bartender and with that background in forensic psychology.
I guess I would say yes, I have those skills. I have the experience. It's not that folks who are practicing and didn't bartend or go to school don't have them, but it's sort of inherently built into my experience. So yeah.
Well, I think it's really great, because I think sometimes people are removed from the general public, and anyone with a background in psychology we love, because our clients are always dealing with high conflict situations. And one of the biggest complaints is, I wish my lawyer understood the psychology of what I'm dealing with. So that's why I said you're a unicorn with that kind of background. All right, so also you're a little bit unique as a practitioner. You want to talk about that?
I think it's a tough question, because I do think, again, that everyone has their own unique life experience, which usually lends itself into how someone will perform a job or, operate the practice. But I do really believe that the psychology and the bartending background, the exposure, repeated exposure to the clinical understanding and public understanding of psychology has really helped me with clients. I also really focus and prioritize education and communication with the clients. So I really try to make sure pretty much at every conversation that the client doesn't have any questions, they understand what's going on. I won't get off the phone unless they understand, certain things like that. I do think I also build in a lot of empathetic language, because I do understand this is very painful for folks, and so I think that's what sets me a little bit apart.
Yeah, definitely the empathy, and we have the hashtag empowerment through education. My background is as a high school English teacher and an educator, and so we're all about, that's part of why we're doing this interview, is to educate people on the reality of what the system is really like and how to operate properly within it. And Ruth, you don't work for a big company, right?
No, I work for myself. I started my own practice, yeah.
So sole practitioner.
Solo practitioner, although I have to say there's nothing solo about how I practice. Shout out to, I have two really strong and amazing mentors, Barbara Schaefer and Jill Zuccardi, who have really helped me form this career and the practice to get it where it is today.
Okay, that's great. All right, so I don't know if you saw, I think you did, my content this morning was a quote based on something you said, that marriages are the only contract that people don't check the box for terms and conditions. Why is this significant to you? I love that quote.
So I jokingly use the phrase terms and conditions because it cheekily gives homage to all the apps, the contracts, the programs that we sign up for daily. We quickly check the box to bypass any of the warning, the rules of engagement, essentially, for that app or program, just to be let in and just to have access to that program. I find that to be the case with a lot of folks who are in divorce situations. They have not thought about what would happen if the divorce ended. They have not done any research. They have not gotten educated on it. They've not asked any questions. And so you're just basically saying I do to bypass the terms and conditions and just get married, have the big wedding and kids and whatever pathway feels right for the couple.
Right, and the statistics are pretty high for divorce.
They are. They are. I do think that relationships are, they're very, very difficult, actually. The nature of intimate relationships is very hard. It takes a lot of work. And I wish that folks would get a little bit more educated about the hard times before they jump into the good times.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, one of the things you said was that attorneys get personal. What did you mean by that?
I think I was talking about just the difficulty in the practice. As a practitioner, you're dealing with many different variables. You have the court, which is its own animal. You have a client. You have an opposing party. You have opposing counsel. You might have an attorney for the child. And I just find that sometimes opposing counsel will try and distract from the issues in the case to just capitalize on the tools that they have in order to win a case, which sometimes can mean that they get to be abusive to me as a practitioner or, attack my client personally. And I just think those things have nothing to do with the case. And it's upsetting. It's disheartening as a professional to see that from other practitioners.
Well, I know that I've experienced that, and most of our clients have also experienced opposing counsel getting personal. We see a lot of what feels like bullying by opposing counsel with false allegations and, like you said, distractions from the initial issues or the main issues. And we actually got a question in that I'm wondering, it's not the exact same thing, but if a judge doesn't like you, what do you do? If your client, let's say the judge, not you, but your client, how do you handle that when the judge seems like he or she's already made up their mind about your client and it's not positive?
I think it really depends on why a person might not feel liked by the judge. I don't know if sometimes it's always rooted in reality. I don't know where they're getting that information from. If the attorney's telling their client that the judge doesn't like you or something like that. But how do you change that? I mean, you kind of have to narrow in, focus in on the issues as to why we believe that the judge might not like the client and try to change that narrative. I mean, so much of court is a show. It's about the truth that you can prove, unfortunately, and somewhere in the middle, the parties or you and your client really have to kind of work out some sort of reconciliation between those two realities. And so part of that is a lot of coaching, and probably, you get clients, and this is the basis of your business, is to inform and educate and let folks know how they should be acting, how they should be presenting, the different ways to sort of garner good behavior in front of the court.
I was going to say, speaking of that, are there, let's say, frequently not asked questions, but tips that you say generally, this is how you need to act in court. This is how to make a judge like you.
I don't know how to get anyone to like somebody, but I just try to inform and educate people on how to act respectfully in court, and that is to not make faces, not pound the table, don't give dirty looks to anybody, don't speak over me as your attorney if you have something to say. There's a level of decorum that folks are not used to because they just don't spend time in court day in and day out like attorneys do. And they think that this is, their case is the only case in front of the judge, and it's just not. So I just try to really teach them how to be respectful and how it's almost better if the court doesn't notice the client in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you just gave like 4 tips right there. So I thought that's exactly what I asked for. That's perfect. Okay, another thing you had talked about in our initial conversation was something about trusting your instincts during the process. What did you mean by that?
So this is a little bit more of a loaded question just because it takes into account so many different things, but trusting your instincts. So relationships and the breakdown of relationships, right? You enter into relationships using some instincts, right? You're like, I think this person's a good person. I like the way they look. I like what they do for me. I like what I hear them say. These are all based on instincts. Over time, when a relationship sort of distorts or there's issues that arise and kind of manifest in different ways, you start not to trust those instincts anymore. your instincts get distorted because of what has gone on. In instances where there's violence or abuse or psychological, other, I don't want to say pressures, things like that, your instincts you lose your way in a sense. And so what I try to help folks do during my time with them is to try to reacclimate them to what their core instincts are, that they can trust them, because at some points, you in a divorce, I notice that folks are kind of out of their minds. This is a very traumatic event. They don't know what's up from down after being with somebody for so long, and it's ending, and what do I do, and how do I? So we try to center them back to what their core instincts are, who they are as a person, to try and build back the ability to function, have a sense for things. There's life after death, get your compass back, that kind of thing.
Are there specific techniques that you recommend or that you use? I know this is a huge question, but we know that a lot of people are coming out of, at least our clients and the people watching this are coming out of coercively controlled relationships or some kind of domestic abuse. They often, like you said, they don't know which way is up. It's sometimes hard to make very important decisions because their agency has deteriorated over the relationship, and it's just really, really hard and confusing. It can be difficult, I know, for lawyers to work with, because most lawyers are not trained in dealing with that kind of domestic violence, especially the insidious kind of emotional abuse, where sometimes it's like, why can't this person just make a decision? Or why do they keep going back to their partner if they already filed papers for divorce? How do you deal with that? Like the stop and start?
Depending on how do I deal with the stop and start? I don't know. I mean, it's very client specific. So depending on the client, and I usually can tell this in the consultation, but usually depending on the issues, I might recommend that they see a mental health professional to discuss some of these things, because it's kind of a detangling. They have to start detangling, and they have to start understanding what has happened to them, what is currently going on, how this impacts the way that they, interact in the litigation itself. And so a lot of self-care suggestions, a lot of mental health care suggestions is usually what I make. And I always ask a lot of questions. I try not to tell people what they want. I try to elicit that, so that kind of helps to build within them by asking themselves the question, what they want in the end.
Yeah. Okay. What about, let's see. Well, speaking of making decisions, we talked about how, because people are in a panic state, a lot of the times it's hard for them to make decisions. But how do you deal with clients who are in this panic state? And I'm not just talking about high conflict divorce or separations, because at the beginning, everybody's panicking, and like you said, it is very traumatic. So how do you get people to out of the panic? Or like I in my head, I'm thinking about when I first gave birth, how one of the nurses like, just look at me, just listen to what I'm saying, just focus on me. And I was like, this is what I need, someone just to tell me what to do right now to get through this. It's not the same, but it's parallel.
And that's tough, because when somebody is panicking, they do need somebody, a person, certain people might need for someone to sort of grab you by the face and say, listen to me, and I generally can do that, obviously, without not touching anybody's face, but I'll say, slow down. Like I'll notice and recognize either the kind of anxious or manic feeling to certain things. I can notice when somebody's in a panic state, maybe traumatized, they're not really listening, they're not able to communicate properly, or correctly with me, like they're not answering questions, the eye contact's everywhere. So I'll say, just hold on a second, take a deep breath. I do encourage people to take a deep breath, listen to the question that I'm asking you. Are you able to answer this question right now? And sometimes the answer is no. And so then, as long as it's not an emergency question, I'll say, just sleep on it. Like if you feel this strongly about something now, or you have no idea, think about this question for 24 hours and we'll talk tomorrow. It's like, if it's not an emergency, we don't have to decide right now. And so I just kind of it's kind of invoking the 24-hour rule. It's what I call it.
Yeah, I think that pause is so important. I've talked about that in a variety of areas, but just to be able to like think for a moment instead of rushing in. How you describe the manic talk, we get that all the time too. And Chris, my partner, does this thing like this, like timeout to be on Zoom. And we were talking with a client earlier today and saying the progress that person has made, and joking about how, remember in the beginning it was always like, slow down.
Yes.
But things have really improved in terms of like calming down and pausing and thinking a lot more clearly. So it's rewarding to see the progress. Okay, so one of the things you also talked about, a question that you get all the time that I know lawyers get constantly, is how much is it going to cost? At the beginning, how do you deal with that?
I usually deal with it by giving the most unhelpful answer I can give, which is it depends. And so much of divorce and separation is dependent on the parties. It depends on the parties' relationship, the incidents that have gone on, whether there are children or not, whether there's property or not, all the different elements of a divorce, in addition to their dynamic at the time in which they are divorcing, the level of communication. If you have two people who can't speak to each other, then it's going to go through, all communications will go through attorneys, and that costs more. If you are a little bit more savvy and can put your feelings aside to try and talk to the person, even though you can't stand them, it may cost you less, right? But then there's always like some sort of base cost, because depending on the elements of the case, if there's custody issues, if there's, all the other elements like property and things like that.
Are there things, like I think back to I had a wonderful divorce attorney, and he told me later, well, actually, no, he told me the first consult, yours is going to be one of the bad ones. And I interviewed him later for our book and said, how did you know? And he had a little list in his head that I don't even know if he realized he was doing, but are there things where during a consult you're thinking, this one's going to be bad?
I think one of the biggest tells for me that a case is going to be bad is when the person actually comes in and says, I don't care about X, Y, or Z. I just want to hurt them. I want to, make them feel the pain that I'm feeling. I want to, draw this out, drive them crazy. Like, if the goal is not to actually separate, that's a red flag for me, right? Because people are going to just use the litigation as a venue for abuse. So I won't take those cases because I can't, in good conscience, even do the things that they're asking. It's unethical. So,
well, that's a pleasure to hear. I was going to say, what do you do with those people? Because those tend to be the difficult personalities. Those are our clients.
Sometimes I'll send them out. I'll refer them out, or I'll just tell them that I usually say, there's an attorney out there who may align with your interests. I am not one of them. My goals are to settle the cases, get you out of this, and make the divorce look like just a time in your life. I don't try to increase the duration of it and make it your life. So that's and it's not an accusational thing. Like, as you've noted, there are plenty of people who litigate for long periods of time. Some of it's not one or the other litigant's fault, right? There's lots of different elements. But if somebody comes in saying, I want to go ham on this case, I'm just not taking it.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of shocking that someone would say it right there to an attorney, like, this is what I want revenge.
Yeah. I mean, there's cheating involved. There's stealing money. There's gambling away life savings. There's, lots of different elements. There's alienation of the children. There's abuse, There's a lot of reasons to feel the way they feel, and it's justified. But that doesn't mean that we then take the litigation and turn it into a venue for World War IV.
Yeah. Okay, what about something you had said was, do not break up with me?
I don't know if I said do not break up with me. I think I said something like you do not want to break up with me,
okay,
which is, right. Yeah.
All right, let me clarify. So you said, so why wouldn't someone want to break up with you?
I'm just, I use that in the context as to say, choose wisely. Okay, choose your attorney wisely, because you do not want to enter into you don't want to get in, you don't want to have another breakup while you're in the middle of one. So one is enough, right? You don't want to have to share your entire story with an attorney, give them all the documents, talk to them, pay them money, and then all of a sudden you decide this person's not for me. So again, it's another terms and conditions type of bit of advice, which is do your research, know who's out there, know what you're getting into before you do it.
So speaking of that, are there any tips that you have to recommend how someone should choose an attorney that's going to stick, that they're not going to end up breaking up with?
It's really hard to say, because again, it's really person to person, case by case. And I do think that it's a budding relationship. So
yeah,
you look for things in a person that you might like, which if that person's instincts are off, if they're not taking care of that, that you could get locked in with an attorney that you didn't like and you didn't know, right? There's so many different things, but that, I guess that's why I say to focus on instincts, grow your instincts, trust your instincts, even in a time of unknowing, because you really have to make a lot of important decisions that have lifelong ramifications for you, even in the moment of trauma. So it really does depend on the person. I mean, I guess, like I was just saying, if there's a person who comes into my office and says, I want to destroy this person, they will go find an attorney who will do that. That attorney, by maybe certain accounts, maybe he's not a good attorney, right, to some people. But to that guy, he's a great attorney. So yeah, it's really subjective, in my opinion.
It makes me think of rapport, like with a therapist. You want to feel like you have a good rapport, like you can trust the person, because that attorney, I know my attorney during my divorce for that year, that was like one of my best friends. I mean, I think he made a lot of money, but I felt like he really had my back. I felt very comfortable with him, and I completely trusted him in his judgment. And I felt very taken care of when I needed to feel taken care of.
I will always encourage people to speak to at least more than one. Mm-hmm. After they talk to me, if I'm the first attorney, I'm like, please just talk to at least one or two more just to get a sense. They'll probably tell you the same base information, but just get a sense for the personality, Yeah. Just
okay. I was going to say, sorry, we just got a question in. Someone is saying that there's a woman that has to do a 2-week trial, and how can she tell the judge, I don't know if you can answer this, but I'll just throw it out there. How can she tell the judge that she's not capable of representing herself and she doesn't qualify for indigent status?
I don't know. Okay. I mean, there's so much information missing from that for me, right? Yeah. Because it's there's a base of what has gone on in the case, who that person is. Does that person have a PhD and she's a working person, and all of a sudden she's like, I can't do this? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. It just doesn't sound like it. She's bordering the indigent status, but I can't answer that without more.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. All right. So before, you alluded earlier to there's life after death in terms of a person's case. What does that mean?
So just that the divorce case isn't everything. The divorce doesn't define you, just like a loss of a job doesn't, or moving your house doesn't. You define you. It sounds so corny, but it's true. I think it's, divorce can be so emotional, it can be so toxic and intense. People get really sucked in, especially when there's issues of violence or abuse. So I just like to remind people that there's going to be a time after this. You will feel as stressed out as you do right now, but maybe the spouse moving out at the end of this, at the end of the litigation, will feel like the biggest spring cleaning of your life. So just remember that there's another stage for you waiting, and let's hurry up and get there, because you don't want to live in this place for very long.
Yeah, that's great. And it's good to hear it from an attorney that sees this all the time, because we know that while in the middle of it, it feels like it's never going to end. And especially for people like our clients, where in our community, where they're stuck in the legal system for years, and me just coming out of court today, my 9th year still, but it's like I'm way ahead of most people, but it does feel like it's never gonna stop. And I'm not in like the extreme pain that I was years ago, but many of our people are, and they just feel like there's no end, and they're just terrified and overwhelmed. So again, I'm glad that you noted this doesn't last. Like, you don't have clients forever, right? They finish, they go through it, it takes however long, and then you move on.
Yes, that's the idea.
Yeah.
I usually, my parting words for a client after we finish a case is usually, I hope you never see me again. And I mean, and I mean it in the kindest way. I say, I loved you as a client. You were great. Thank you for everything. I hope you never see me again.
That's really good. Okay. Another thing we talked about was finding moments of joy and how important this is. I talk about how important it is for people to make sure they have fun. I don't just say self-care, but like fun, to get the dopamine hits of like pleasure, because you're getting such the opposite most of the time. So can you talk about that in relation to parenting during a divorce or separation? Because so many of the people watching this do have kids, and they're stuck. They can't just walk away and you know, move to another state.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to find joy, but it's just, I think what that represents really is just being able to achieve a different mindset during a time of trauma, grief, anger, right? Again, it's about not getting sucked in to the deep toxicity of the breakup, the deep sadness. Some of it you need to feel, but you also need to give your brain a rest from all of that sadness and heaviness, and remind yourself, and this again goes to the the finding, trusting your instincts, the getting back on your feet, there's life after death. This is a portion of your life. It's not your entire life, right? It's an event. So finding joy during times of grief can be really healing for people, right? We see that in death, like folks will connect and they'll have laughter over the person that they're grieving. I mean, and that's really healing and important to that process. So especially if you have children, those kids are watching you, they're learning from you, they're seeing the sadness, and some of that is probably just the way it's going to be, but as often as you can, just try and have fun with them, do something out of the box, be creative. And I'm by no means demanding this of anyone. I know it's very difficult, you know, in the middle, like just encouraging you to try and find that place, not lose it.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so is there anything else that you want to add, Ruth?
I think the last thing I would say is just I hope that everyone can remember when they go through a divorce, you know, to sort of focus on the battle that they're fighting. I would like for people to think more about what they actually want from the divorce, and not necessarily, like, to understand the court system is not going to heal pain and suffering. This is not a personal injury case, right? You have to think about it. The courts are there to break up a legal contract. You're in a legal contract. They're there to break it up, separate property, help you figure out what's going on with the kids, and that's really it. It's not there to punish. They're not a therapeutic court. They're not there to like you or not like you. I mean, regardless of whether they do or not. But just keep your eye on the prize. Hopefully that's getting out quickly, safely, and sanely. And,
Right.
you know, sort of just preserve what you have left and move on.
Yeah. Okay, so how can people find you, Ruth? And are you just practice in New York?
I do just practice in New York, and I only practice in the 4 boroughs, actually. I don't want to charge folks to go to Staten Island, yeah. So my office is in Manhattan. I have an Instagram. I think it's Ruth Chung.
I have it. It's
okay. Facebook, and a website, which is chungfirm.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking, and I'm sure I'll run into you in person soon.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope it was informative to folks. To see you soon.
Definitely. I'm already thinking about little nuggets and clips I'm gonna use.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Ruth. See ya.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.